I still remember the day my father died. Not just the date, August 17th, but the exact moment, 3:42 p.m. on a Tuesday. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and finality. The rhythmic beeping of monitors had become the soundtrack to our lives for weeks, until they flatlined into that single, endless tone that changed everything. I was holding his hand when it happened, feeling the warmth slowly fade as the nurses rushed in. I was 17. "He's gone," the doctor said, his voice distant through the ringing in my ears. "I'm so sorry." I nodded mechanically, tears streaming down my face as I squeezed Dad's hand one last time. My stepmother, Diane, stood in the corner, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. Not a single tear. Not one. I should have known then what was coming, but grief has a way of blinding you to the obvious. "We should go, Emma," she said, her voice oddly firm. "There are arrangements to make." I couldn't move. Couldn't leave him. "Just a few more minutes," I whispered. "Now, Emma." Her hand clamped around my arm, fingernails digging in. "There's nothing more we can do here." That was the first time I noticed the shift in her tone. The careful facade she'd maintained during the 3 years of her marriage to my father had already begun to crack, revealing glimpses of what lay beneath. But I was too consumed by grief to recognize the warning signs. Dad's funeral passed in a blur. I remember standing beside his casket, surrounded by his colleagues from the university where he'd taught literature for 20 years, listening to stories about his brilliance, his kindness, his humor. Diane played the part of the devastated widow flawlessly, accepting condolences with downcast eyes and a trembling lower lip. Several people commented on how lucky I was to have such a caring stepmother to help me through this difficult time. If only they knew. The transformation began the day after we returned from the cemetery. I came downstairs to find Diane sitting at the kitchen table, a stack of papers in front of her, her reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked different somehow, sharper, colder. "Good, you're up," she said without looking at me. "There's a list on the refrigerator of chores that need to be done today." I blinked, confused. "What?" "Chores, Emma. You know, cleaning, washing, the things that keep a house running." She finally looked up, her eyes flat and businesslike. "Your father may have allowed you to live like a princess, but those days are over. You live in my house now and you'll earn your keep." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Your house? This is my home. Dad and I lived here long before—" "Check the papers, darling." She slid a document across the table. "Your father put everything in my name before he died. The house, the cars, even his life insurance. All mine." Her smile was thin and predatory. "Legally, I could throw you out today if I wanted to." I snatched up the paper, scanning the legal jargon with growing horror. She was right. Somehow, during his illness, she had convinced my father to sign everything over to her. There was my dad's familiar signature at the bottom, shakier than usual, but unmistakably his. "Why would he do this?" I whispered, more to myself than to her. "Because he trusted me to take care of you, of course." She removed her glasses, folding them carefully. "And I will. You'll have a roof over your head, food to eat. In exchange, you'll take care of the house. Seems fair, doesn't it? I have school. I have college applications. Oh, I think we both know college isn't in your future anymore." She stood up, smoothing her immaculate slacks. "Your father's medical bills were substantial. There's nothing left for tuition, I'm afraid." My stomach dropped. "But his insurance will barely cover our living expenses." She cut me off with a wave of her hand. "Now, I suggest you get started on that list. The bathrooms won't clean themselves." I stood there, frozen, as the full reality of my situation began to sink in. My father was gone. The future we had planned together, college, my dream of becoming a writer like him, suddenly seemed to be evaporating before my eyes. "This isn't right," I said, my voice barely audible. "Dad wouldn't want this." Something flashed in Diane's eyes then, a momentary crack in her composed exterior. "Your father isn't here anymore, is he? It's just you and me now, Emma. And you'd better get used to the new arrangement." Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "After all, I'm the only family you have left." That was the beginning of my descent into a nightmare I couldn't have imagined. Over the next 6 months, my life transformed into something unrecognizable. The woman who had once pretended to care for me revealed herself to be a monster wearing the mask of motherhood. The list of chores grew longer each day. I woke at 5 a.m. to make Diane's breakfast and pack her lunch before school. After classes, I rushed home to clean, do laundry, prepare dinner, and tackle whatever special projects she had devised. Scrubbing grout with a toothbrush, reorganizing her extensive shoe collection by designer, then color, then heel height, ironing her sheets and underwear to her exacting specifications. "Missed a spot," she would say, running a white-gloved finger along a baseboard or shelf. "Do it again." My hands grew raw from cleaning products. My back ached from hours of scrubbing floors. My grades began to slip as exhaustion took its toll. When my English teacher, Mrs. Collins, expressed concern about my falling asleep in class, I made excuses about insomnia and stress. I couldn't tell the truth. Couldn't admit that I had become a servant in my own home. "Emma, don't you think you should talk to someone?" Mrs. Collins asked one day after class. "A counselor, maybe? You don't seem like yourself lately." I forced a smile. "I'm fine, really. Just adjusting to everything." She didn't look convinced, but she didn't push further. I hurried away before she could ask more questions. What would I have told her anyway? That my stepmother had essentially enslaved me? That I had no money, no power, nowhere to go? That the woman my father had trusted had betrayed that trust in the most fundamental way? The few times I attempted to stand up for myself, Diane's retaliation was swift and cruel. When I came home late after staying at the library to finish a paper, she locked me out of the house overnight. When I dared to question the legitimacy of the documents giving her control of everything, she canceled my phone service and took my laptop, claiming they were privileges I hadn't earned. "You should be grateful," she told me repeatedly. "Many stepmothers would have sent you to foster care the moment your father died. I'm giving you a home, food, clothing. All I ask in return is that you contribute." Contribute, as if 18 hours of labor a day was a reasonable contribution from a grieving teenager. My friends gradually stopped calling when I consistently couldn't meet them. My world shrank to school and the prison my home had become. I lost weight, my clothes hanging from my frame as I moved through my days like a ghost. At night I cried silently into my pillow, missing my father with an ache that never seemed to diminish. One evening, as I was preparing Diane's dinner, salmon with dill sauce, asparagus, and wild rice, all prepared exactly as she demanded, she came into the kitchen dressed for an evening out, dripping in jewelry that I recognized as my mother's. "Those are my mom's pieces," I said before I could stop myself, staring at the diamond and sapphire necklace that had been one of the few things I had left of the mother who had died when I was 8. Diane's hand went to the necklace, fingering the stones. "Were your mother's, dear? Your father gave them to me before he died." Her smile was vicious. "He said they suited me far better than they ever suited her." Something snapped inside me. "You're lying. He would never say that. He would never give you mom's jewelry." The slap came so quickly I didn't have time to react. My head jerked to the side, my cheek burning. "Don't you ever accuse me of lying, you ungrateful little bitch." Diane's voice was low and dangerous. "Your father saw me for the woman I am, beautiful, sophisticated, worthy of the finer things. Things that would be wasted on a plain, pathetic girl like you." I stood there, hand to my face, as tears welled in my eyes, not from the pain, but from the pure hatred I felt coursing through me. "One day," I whispered, "you'll regret this." She laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Oh, will I? And what exactly will you do, Emma? You have nothing. No money, no power, no one who cares about you. You're mine until I decide otherwise." She leaned in close, her expensive perfume choking me. "And I think I'll keep you around for a very, very long time. Every queen needs a servant after all." As she swept out of the kitchen in a cloud of Chanel No. 5, I realized something fundamental had changed within me. The grief and shock that had paralyzed me for months began to crystallize into something harder, sharper. In that moment, a seed was planted, a seed of rebellion, of vengeance. I wouldn't be her servant forever. I wouldn't let her win. That night, after Diane had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a cold cup of tea, thinking. My options seemed limited. I was still a minor for another 5 months. I had no money, no family to turn to. Diane had been careful to isolate me completely, but I had something she didn't. Time, youth, patience. And now, a burning determination to escape her clutches and make her pay for what she'd done. I needed a plan, a careful, methodical plan that would free me from her control and ensure she faced consequences for her actions. It wouldn't be enough to simply leave when I turned 18. She had stolen too much from me for that. She had taken my father's legacy, my mother's memories, my dignity, my future. No, Diane deserved more than me just walking away. She deserved justice. My justice. The next morning, I began my subtle resistance. Nothing overt enough to trigger her wrath, but small acts of defiance that gave me a sense of control. I deliberately used too much starch in her blouses, making them uncomfortably stiff. I accidentally overcooked her precious organic vegetables by exactly 2 minutes, not enough to justify a tantrum, but enough to ruin the texture she prized. I diluted her expensive shampoo with water, just a bit each time. Tiny rebellions. Microscopic victories. At school, I started paying attention in a way I hadn't for months. Not just to my classes, but to resources that might help me. The guidance counselor's office had pamphlets about domestic abuse, legal aid, emergency housing. I memorized phone numbers, websites, hours of operation. Information was power, and I needed all the power I could get. I began making excuses to stay after school. Study groups, makeup tests, club meetings. Any reason to reduce the hours under Diane's thumb. I used the school computers to research tenant rights, inheritance law, financial abuse. I learned that what Diane had done, isolating me, forcing me to work excessive hours, controlling all aspects of my life, constituted abuse under the law. But I also learned that proving it would be difficult. It would be her word against mine, and she was a master manipulator who had fooled everyone around us, including my intelligent, perceptive father. I needed evidence. During my research, I discovered something else. Apparently, my father had a will before his marriage to Diane, a will that would have left everything to me, with provisions for a guardian until I came of age. Had that will been superseded, or had Diane somehow hidden it? The thought burned in my mind, keeping me awake at night as I lay in bed, planning. 2 months after the night Diane slapped me, I had my first real breakthrough. I was cleaning her home office, a task she only allowed when she was home to supervise, when she received a phone call that required her immediate attention. Some crisis at her interior design business that couldn't wait. "Don't touch anything on my desk," she warned as she hurried out. "Just dust the shelves and vacuum. I'll know if you've been snooping." The moment her car pulled out of the driveway, I went straight to her desk. Her computer was password protected, of course, but she wasn't nearly as careful with her paper files. I quickly photographed documents with my school-issued tablet, bank statements showing regular transfers from accounts I didn't recognize, letters from my father's attorney that she had apparently intercepted, and most damning of all, a handwritten note from my father dated just days before his death. "Diane," it read, "I'm concerned about the papers you had me sign last week." My mind was clouded from the pain medication, and I don't recall exactly what they entailed. "Please bring them to the hospital tomorrow so we can review them together. Emma's future security is my primary concern." My hands shook as I read the words. Dad had been suspicious. He had realized, even in his weakened state, that something wasn't right. But he had died before he could correct whatever she had manipulated him into signing. I heard the garage door opening and quickly replaced everything, resuming my dusting just as Diane walked back in. She looked around suspiciously, but the office appeared untouched. "Did you finish in here?" she asked, eyes narrowed. "Almost," I replied, forcing my voice to remain even despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Just need to vacuum." She watched me for a long moment, then nodded. "Make sure you get under the desk properly this time. I found dust bunnies last week." "Yes, Diane," I said meekly, while inside a fire was building. I had proof now. Not enough to take legal action yet, but enough to know I wasn't crazy. My father had been manipulated. I had been robbed. And Diane would eventually pay for both crimes. That night, I created a secure online account where I uploaded the photos I had taken. I needed to keep gathering evidence, building my case piece by piece. And I needed to find that original will. If it still existed, it could be the key to everything. As weeks passed, I settled into a dual existence. On the surface, I remained the obedient stepdaughter, performing my endless chores with apparent resignation. But beneath that compliant exterior, I was meticulously documenting everything, photographing the lists of chores, recording Diane's verbal abuse when possible, tracking the hours I was forced to work, saving every scrap of evidence of financial manipulation I could find. I also began squirreling away small amounts of money. When Diane sent me to buy groceries, I would purchase store brands instead of the premium products she demanded, pocketing the difference. When she gave me cash for dry cleaning, I would walk the 3 miles to a cheaper cleaner in the next town, saving a few dollars each time. I volunteered to sell some of her unwanted designer items online, taking a small, unreported percentage of each sale. Penny by penny, dollar by dollar, I built a secret emergency fund, hidden in a waterproof container buried in the garden beneath the rose bushes I tended weekly. Not enough to escape yet, but a start. The dynamic between us shifted subtly as my 18th birthday approached. Diane seemed aware that her legal control over me would diminish once I reached adulthood. Her attempts to isolate me intensified. She accidentally destroyed the acceptance letters I received from several state colleges, then feigned sympathy when I discovered them in the trash. "Oh, Emma, I'm so sorry. But perhaps it's for the best. College is expensive, and as I've told you, there's simply no money for that. Besides, you're needed here." "Needed," I repeated flatly. "You mean as your unpaid housekeeper?" A dangerous smile spread across her face. "I prefer to think of it as an apprenticeship in adulthood, learning valuable life skills." She poured herself a glass of my father's expensive scotch, one of the many things of his she had appropriated. "Besides, where would you go? How would you support yourself? You have no money, no practical job skills." "I could get a job," I said. "A real one with actual pay." "Doing what exactly? Waitressing? Retail? On minimum wage?" She laughed. "You wouldn't last a month. The world out there is harsh, Emma. You have no idea how good you have it here." "Good?" I couldn't hold back a bitter laugh. "I work from dawn until midnight. I have no friends anymore, no social life. You control everything I do, everything I have. I provide everything you need," she countered. "Food, shelter, clothing. Many children would be grateful." "I'm not a child anymore," I said quietly. "And this isn't normal. This isn't right." Something flickered in her eyes, a momentary uncertainty, quickly replaced by cold anger. "Don't be dramatic. If you're so miserable, the door is right there." She gestured toward the front of the house. "But don't expect me to take you back when you fail. And you will fail, Emma. Without me, you're nothing." I held her gaze for a long moment, then turned away, unwilling to let her see how her words affected me. Because despite my growing resolve, part of me feared she was right. The practical challenges of leaving were daunting. Where would I go? How would I support myself? Would anyone believe what she had done to me? But that night, as I lay in bed replaying our conversation, I realized something important. Diane was afraid. Her attempts to undermine my confidence, to convince me I couldn't survive without her, came from fear. Fear that I would leave. Fear that she would lose her control, her servant, her punching bag. And that realization gave me strength. 3 weeks before my 18th birthday, I caught another break. Diane had gone to a charity function, one of the many social events where she played the role of the generous, sophisticated widow. I had been ordered to clean out the attic while she was gone, a miserable, dusty job that would normally take days. As I sorted through boxes of holiday decorations and old clothing, I discovered a locked file cabinet hidden behind some old suitcases. It was small, the kind that might hold important documents rather than general paperwork, and it had my father's initials engraved on the front, JTH, James Thomas Harrington. My heart raced as I examined the lock. It was a simple key lock, nothing sophisticated. After a moment's hesitation, I ran downstairs to my father's study, now Diane's home office, and slid open the desk drawer where he used to keep spare keys. Most were gone now, replaced by Diane's own collection of manicure tools and expensive pens, but at the very back, stuck in the wood track of the drawer, I found a small silver key. My hands trembled as I carried it back to the attic. It slid into the lock of the cabinet smoothly, turning with a satisfying click. Inside were folders neatly labeled in my father's handwriting: insurance, property deeds, investment accounts, last will and testament. I pulled out the will folder with shaking hands. Inside was a document dated 3 years ago, just before his marriage to Diane. It left everything to me, with provisions for a trust until I turned 25, managed by my father's longtime friend and attorney, Michael Brennan. There was also a letter addressed to me, sealed in an envelope with "For Emma in case" written on the front. Tears blurred my vision as I opened it. "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, I'm no longer with you, and for that, I am so deeply sorry. No father wants to leave his child alone in this world, especially one as precious to me as you. I've tried to ensure your future is secure. Everything I have built over my lifetime is yours. The house where you grew up, the investments I've made, the insurance policies. Mr. Brennan will help you manage these assets until you're ready to do so yourself. If I have married again by the time you read this, know that I intended any such union to bring additional love and support into your life, never to diminish what is rightfully yours. No matter what changes may have occurred in our family structure, my intentions for your inheritance remain unchanged. Trust yourself, Emma. You have your mother's strength and my stubborn determination. Whatever challenges you face, I know you will overcome them with the grace and intelligence that have always made me so proud. All my love always, Dad. Tears streamed down my face as I read and reread his words. This was the proof I needed, proof that he had never intended to disinherit me, never meant for Diane to control everything. The documents she had made him sign while medicated must have been obtained through deception. I carefully photographed every page of the will and the letter, then returned everything exactly as I had found it, locking the cabinet and replacing the key in the desk drawer. Diane couldn't know what I had discovered. Not yet. That night, I emailed the attorney mentioned in my father's will, Michael Brennan. I explained who I was and asked for a meeting, saying only that it concerned my father's estate and that discretion was essential. I used my school email address, knowing Diane had no access to it. To my surprise, he responded within hours, agreeing to meet me the following afternoon. I would have to skip my last 2 classes, but it was worth whatever punishment Diane might devise when she discovered my absence. The next day, I sat across from Mr. Brennan in his downtown office, nervously twisting the strap of my backpack as I told him everything: the document Diane had my father sign while medicated, the financial control, the forced labor, the isolation, the emotional and occasional physical abuse. I showed him the photographs of the will and letter I had discovered, along with the other evidence I had been gathering. His expression grew increasingly grim as I spoke. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Emma," he finally said, "I am so sorry. I had no idea any of this was happening. Your father and I were friends for over 20 years. If I had known, is the will I found still valid?" I asked, cutting to what felt like the most crucial question. He sighed. "It should be. A more recent will would supersede it, but from what you've described, any document your father signed while heavily medicated and without proper witnesses could potentially be challenged, especially given your evidence of your father's concerns about what he had signed. So I could get my inheritance back? The house, everything? Potentially, yes. But Emma, these kinds of legal battles can take time. Months, sometimes years. And they can be expensive." I felt a flicker of despair. "I don't have money for lawyers. Diane controls everything. As your father's friend, I'm willing to take this case on a contingency basis," he said, his expression softening. "That means I only get paid if we win." Hope surged through me. "You'd do that? James would have wanted me to protect you." He leaned forward. "But Emma, I'm concerned about your immediate safety. If Diane realizes you're taking legal action against her, the situation at home could deteriorate rapidly." "I turn 18 in less than 3 weeks?" I said. "Once I'm legally an adult, I'm leaving. I have a small amount of money saved, enough for a deposit on a cheap apartment, maybe." "That's still 3 weeks where you're vulnerable," he pointed out. "Is there somewhere else you could stay until then? A friend's house, perhaps?" I shook my head. "Diane has isolated me pretty effectively, and anyone I might ask would have to contact her for permission since I'm still a minor." Mr. Brennan considered this, then reached a decision. "All right, here's what we'll do. Continue as you have been for now. Don't give Diane any reason to suspect you're planning to leave or take legal action. On your 18th birthday, my office will file for an emergency injunction to freeze the assets of your father's estate, pending a full investigation of the circumstances surrounding the transfer of those assets to Diane." "And I can leave that day?" I asked, hardly daring to hope. "You can. You'll be a legal adult. She'll have no authority to stop you." He wrote something on a notepad and passed it to me. "This is my personal cell number. If at any point before your birthday you feel you're in immediate danger, call me, day or night, and we'll get you out immediately. Minor status be damned." For the first time in months, I felt the weight on my shoulders lighten slightly. I wasn't alone anymore. Someone believed me. Someone was willing to help. "Thank you," I whispered, tucking the number carefully into my wallet. "One more thing," he said as I stood to leave. "I'd like you to document any further abuse or manipulation. Written records, photographs if possible, audio recordings if you can do so safely. The more evidence we have, the stronger our case will be." I nodded. "I've been doing that already. I'll keep collecting proof." He walked me to the door of his office. "Emma, your father would be proud of the strength you've shown. And he would be horrified at what Diane has done. We're going to make this right." As I headed back to the house that had become my prison, a strange sense of calm settled over me. 3 more weeks. Less than a month of servitude left. I could endure anything for that long, knowing freedom and justice waited on the other side. What I didn't know then was that Diane had more cruelty in store for me, and that my carefully laid plans would soon be forced to accelerate in ways I couldn't have anticipated. The next morning, I awoke to find Diane standing in my doorway, her face a mask of cold fury. In her hand was my school tablet. "Care to explain this?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. My blood ran cold. I had been careful to delete my browser history, to remove any trace of my research and documentation. But had I missed something? "It's my school tablet," I said cautiously. "For assignments. Yes, I'm aware of its intended purpose. What I'm curious about is why the school called yesterday afternoon to report your absence from your last 2 classes. Classes you were supposedly attending while you were doing God knows what with God knows who." Relief flooded through me. She hadn't discovered my documentation or my meeting with Mr. Brennan. She only knew I had skipped classes. "I wasn't feeling well," I lied. "I went to the library to rest for a bit and lost track of time." "Interesting. Because I called all the libraries in the area and none of them remembered seeing you." She stepped into my room, her heels clicking ominously on the hardwood floor. "So I'll ask again, where were you?" "I went for a walk." I tried again. "I needed to clear my head." "A walk." Her tone made it clear she didn't believe me. "For 2 hours." "Yes." She studied me for a long moment, then smiled thinly. "Well, since you apparently have so much extra energy for unauthorized walks, I think we need to adjust your chore load accordingly." She handed me a piece of paper with a list that was easily twice the length of my normal duties. "I expect everything on this list to be completed to my satisfaction before you leave for school tomorrow." I glanced at the list, my heart sinking. It would take all night to finish everything she had listed. This isn't reasonable. "I have homework and I need to sleep. You should have thought of that before you decided to lie to me and skip your classes." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and I'll be keeping this until further notice." She held up my tablet. "Since you clearly can't be trusted with it." "I need that for school," I protested. "All our assignments are online. You can use the desktop computer in the kitchen, where I can monitor your activities." Her smile was vicious. "And Emma? If you ever disappear like that again, the consequences will be much more severe. 3 weeks until you turn 18 doesn't mean you're free to defy me. I am still legally responsible for you, and I can make what's left of your childhood a living hell if I choose to." The threat hung in the air between us. As she walked away, I remained frozen, processing what had just happened. She was suspicious, but she didn't know the extent of my plans. The tablet was a loss, but not a catastrophic one. I had already backed up my evidence in secure cloud storage she couldn't access. But her warning was clear. She was watching me more closely now. That night, as I scrubbed bathroom tiles at 2 a.m., my back aching and fingers raw, I mentally recalculated my plans. I had hoped to continue gathering evidence quietly for the next 3 weeks, but Diane's increased vigilance made that more difficult. I would have to be even more careful, more strategic. I also realized I needed a backup plan. If Diane somehow discovered what I was doing before my birthday, I needed to be ready to leave immediately. Mr. Brennan had given me his number for emergencies, but I would still need somewhere to go, some way to support myself until the legal proceedings could run their course. As dawn broke and I finally finished the last item on Diane's punitive list, I made a decision. I would accelerate my preparations. Every day until my birthday would be dedicated not just to gathering evidence, but to concrete escape planning. At school that day, exhausted but determined, I approached Mrs. Collins after English class. "I need to talk to you," I said quietly. "In private. It's important." She looked at me with concern, noting the dark circles under my eyes, my too thin frame. "Of course, Emma. Let's go to my office." Once the door was closed, I took a deep breath. "Mrs. Collins, I need to ask you something, and I need you to promise not to tell anyone yet." She frowned but nodded. "If you're not in danger, I can keep your confidence." "I'm leaving home on my 18th birthday," I said. "In exactly 17 days. I can't explain everything right now, but my home situation is not good. I've been in contact with a lawyer, and he's helping me legally, but I need somewhere to stay temporarily while that gets sorted out." Her expression shifted from concern to alarm. "Emma, if you're being abused..." "Please," I interrupted. "I have a plan. A good one. But I need to know if you know of any resources for someone in my situation. Temporary housing, maybe, or job opportunities for someone still finishing high school." Mrs. Collins was silent for a moment, studying me. Then she reached for a notepad. "I have a sister who runs a women's shelter in Oak Ridge, about 20 miles from here. They sometimes have transitional apartments available for young women in difficult situations. She wrote down a name and number. I also know the manager at the bookstore downtown is looking for part-time help. Relief washed over me. Thank you. Really. Emma. Her voice was gentle but firm. I respect that you have a plan, but if you're in immediate danger, there are resources available now. You don't have to wait until you're 18. I know, I assured her. But trust me, this is the best way. I just need these contacts as a backup plan. She didn't look entirely convinced, but she handed me the information. Promise me you'll call me if things escalate before your birthday. I promise. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of exhausting days and sleepless nights. Diane's vigilance never wavered. She checked my schoolwork on the kitchen computer, monitored my phone calls, and assigned even more demanding chores than before. But despite her scrutiny, I managed to make progress. I called the women's shelter from a friend's phone during lunch break and secured a spot in a transitional apartment, available on my birthday if I needed it. I interviewed at the bookstore and was offered a part-time position that would work around my school schedule. I began taking small essentials, a few pieces of clothing, my birth certificate that I found in my father's files, the few photographs and mementos of my parents that I couldn't bear to leave behind, and storing them in my locker at school. Most importantly, I continued documenting Diane's abuse. When she forced me to stay up all night cleaning, I photographed the clock in my tasks. When she berated me for imagined infractions, I secretly recorded her tirades. When she forgot to buy groceries, leaving me without food for 2 days as punishment for some minor oversight, I documented that too. Each piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin I was building for her carefully constructed public image. Each day that passed brought me closer to freedom. 3 days before my birthday, I met with Mr. Brennan again, this time during a legitimate free period at school. I showed him the additional evidence I had gathered. "This is compelling, Emma," he said as he reviewed the photos and recordings. "Combined with the original will and your father's letter, we have a strong case for financial manipulation and exploitation. And the documented abuse strengthens any argument against Diane's character if she tries to fight this." "So we're on track for filing on my birthday?" I asked. "Absolutely. I've prepared all the necessary paperwork. The moment you turn 18, we'll file for the emergency injunction to freeze the assets. We'll also file to have the probate process reopened based on the new evidence regarding your father's true intentions and Diane's manipulation. And after that, Diane will be served with papers. She'll have a chance to respond, of course, but given the evidence, I believe the court will side with us. It may take some time, legal proceedings often do, but I'm confident about the outcome." I nodded, a mixture of anxiety and anticipation churning in my stomach. What if she destroys evidence when she realizes what's happening? The will in the attic, my father's letter? That's why the emergency injunction is so important. It will include provisions preventing her from disposing of or destroying any potential evidence or assets. If she does so anyway, she'll be in contempt of court, which carries its own penalties. The plan was solid. Freedom was within reach. But as I walked back to class, a nagging worry persisted. Diane wasn't stupid. She had successfully manipulated my brilliant father. She had maintained her charade of the caring stepmother to the outside world for years. What if she somehow sensed what was coming and acted first? That evening, as I prepared dinner, Diane watched me from the kitchen island, sipping a glass of wine. Her gaze felt more calculated than usual, more predatory. "Your birthday is coming up," she said casually. I kept my expression neutral as I stirred the risotto. "Yes, 18. A milestone." She swirled the wine in her glass. "Any special plans?" The question felt like a trap. "Not really. It's a school day." She took another sip. "You know, I've been thinking, you'll be a legal adult, but you're still in high school. Still dependent on me for everything. It's an awkward situation." I said nothing, waiting. "I've decided it would be best if we formalize our arrangement," she continued. "Since you'll be an adult, you should contribute to the household expenses. Rent, food, utilities. $1,000 a month seems fair, don't you think?" I nearly dropped the wooden spoon I was holding. $1,000? I don't have any money. You know that. Well, then I suppose you'll have to get a job, won't you? In addition to your chores here, of course. Her smile was cold. "Unless you'd prefer to move out. Though I can't imagine where you'd go with no money, no references, no work experience." She was trying to trap me, to ensure I remained dependent on her even after I turned 18. The cruelty of it made my blood boil, but I kept my face impassive. "I'll figure something out," I said evenly. I'm sure you will. She stood, setting down her empty glass. Dinner in 20 minutes? Yes. As she left the kitchen, I gripped the counter, steadying myself. She was escalating, tightening her control as my birthday approached. Perhaps she sensed my growing independence, my secret preparations. Or perhaps this was simply the next phase in her long-term plan to keep me subservient. Either way, it only strengthened my resolve. 3 more days. Just 3 more days until I could escape this nightmare and begin the process of reclaiming what was rightfully mine. But Diane wasn't finished with her machinations. The next morning, as I was leaving for school, she casually mentioned that she had scheduled a meeting with my guidance counselor for that afternoon. I'm concerned about your college prospects, she said with false sincerity. Given your limited financial resources, I thought we should discuss more realistic options for your future. Alarm bells rang in my mind. This was no routine meeting. This was Diane attempting to further restrict my options, to make official her narrative that college wasn't in my future. I have a test this afternoon, I lied. I can't miss it. I've already cleared it with the school, she replied smoothly. They understand this is important for your future planning. We'll meet with Mrs. Garcia at 2 p.m. Her tone made it clear this wasn't optional. I spent the morning in a state of barely contained panic. If Diane convinced my guidance counselor that college was off the table, it could create yet another obstacle to overcome later. Worse, she might use the meeting to gauge if I had confided in anyone at school about my home situation. During lunch, I slipped away to call Mr. Brennan from a borrowed phone. She's escalating, I told him after explaining the situation. I'm worried about what she might be planning. It does seem suspicious, he agreed. But you only need to maintain the status quo for 2 more days. Try to get through this meeting without revealing anything about our plans. What if she's setting some kind of trap? What if she knows? Even if she suspects something, she can't know the extent of our preparations. Just stay calm, deflect when necessary, and remember, in 2 days, you'll be legally beyond her control. The advice was sound, but as I sat in Mrs. Garcia's office that afternoon with Diane beside me, her hand occasionally squeezing my shoulder in what would appear to an observer as maternal affection, dread pooled in my stomach. I'm so concerned about Emma's future, Diane was saying, her voice dripping with fabricated worry. With her father's medical bills and the current economic situation, college simply isn't financially viable right now. I think we need to look at alternatives, vocational programs perhaps, or job placement services. Mrs. Garcia glanced at me. Emma has excellent grades. She would likely qualify for significant scholarship aid. Oh, I've looked into that, Diane replied smoothly. But even with scholarships, the costs are prohibitive. And Emma understands that, don't you, dear? Her fingers dug painfully into my shoulder. I met Mrs. Garcia's eyes directly. Actually, I'm still hoping to attend college. I believe there are options we haven't fully explored yet. Diane's grip tightened further. Emma tends to be a bit unrealistic about these things. Her father always encouraged her dreams, which was wonderful, but now we need to be practical. The meeting continued in this vein for nearly an hour. Diane systematically dismantling my future plans while maintaining her facade of concerned stepmotherhood, me attempting to keep my options open without revealing too much, and Mrs. Garcia increasingly confused by the tension between us. As we were leaving, Mrs. Garcia asked to speak with me alone for a moment. Diane hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the request, but eventually stepped into the hallway. The moment the door closed, Mrs. Garcia leaned forward. Emma, is everything all right at home? The concern in her eyes nearly broke my composure. For a moment, I was tempted to tell her everything, the abuse, the forced labor, the financial manipulation. But revealing too much now could jeopardize my carefully constructed escape plan. Things are complicated, I said carefully. But I'm handling it. You know you can talk to me if you need help, right? Or any of the counselors here? I nodded. I know. And I appreciate that. But right now, I just need to get through the next couple of days. She seemed to sense there was more I wasn't saying but didn't push further. All right, but my door is always open, Emma. Remember that. When I emerged from her office, Diane was waiting, a tight smile fixed on her face. She remained silent during the drive home, which was somehow more terrifying than any verbal assault would have been. Finally, as we pulled into the driveway, she spoke. What did you and Mrs. Garcia discuss? Just some specific scholarship opportunities. I lied. Nothing important. She turned off the engine but made no move to get out of the car. You know, Emma, I can't help feeling like you're planning something. Something you're not telling me. My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. Planning? Like what? I'm not sure yet. Her gaze was calculating. But I want you to understand something. This house, your father's assets, everything, it's legally mine now. If you're harboring some fantasy about claiming an inheritance when you turn 18, you should abandon it. There's nothing for you to claim. The directness of her statement shocked me. She had never been so explicit about her theft before. I'm not harboring any fantasies, I said, working to keep my voice steady. I'm just trying to get through high school. She studied me for another long moment, then suddenly smiled, the expression not reaching her eyes. Good. Because I would hate for you to be disappointed. Now there's a list of chores on the counter. I expect them done before dinner. That night, as I methodically worked through Diane's punitive list of tasks, my mind raced. Her suspicions were clearly growing. The facade of the concerned stepmother was cracking, revealing more of the calculating predator beneath. Would she take more drastic action before my birthday? Should I accelerate my plans? Leave before I was legally an adult? No, I decided. Leaving early could jeopardize everything. Mr. Brennan had explained that as a minor, I could be legally forced to return home unless I could prove immediate danger. And while Diane's abuse was real and documented, it was primarily emotional and financial, rather than the kind of physical abuse that might warrant emergency intervention. 2 more days. I just had to survive 2 more days. The following day, my last full day as a minor, passed in a haze of tension. Diane called my school twice to verify I was in my classes. She cut my phone service entirely, claiming it was an unnecessary expense. She even drove me to and from school herself, eliminating any opportunity for me to make final preparations. That evening, she informed me that we would be celebrating my birthday with a special dinner the following night. I've invited a few friends, she said casually. People who have been concerned about you. It will be nice to show them how well you're doing, won't it? The implied threat was clear. Any plans I had to leave would be complicated by the presence of witnesses, people who saw only Diane's carefully constructed version of our relationship. But I had anticipated something like this. My escape plan didn't require me to leave immediately after school. I could endure one last dinner, one last performance as the dutiful stepdaughter, knowing it would be the final act in this twisted play. As I went to bed that night, the eve of my 18th birthday, a strange calm settled over me. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of reclaiming my life, my future, my father's legacy. Tomorrow, Diane would learn that underestimating me had been her biggest mistake. I awoke on my birthday feeling different, lighter somehow, despite the challenges that still lay ahead. Legally, I was now an adult. Whatever happened today, Diane could no longer control me as a minor. She was waiting in the kitchen when I came downstairs, already dressed for work in one of her expensive designer suits. A single cupcake with an unlit candle sat on the counter between us. "Happy birthday," she said, her tone indicating it was anything but. 18. How does it feel to be an adult? Different, I replied honestly. Not that different, I imagine. She pushed the cupcake toward me. Your responsibilities here remain the same. Adult or not, you still live under my roof by my rules. I didn't touch the cupcake. Actually, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. About the future. Something shifted in her expression, a flicker of unease quickly masked by condescension. Oh, and what grand plans have you constructed in that naive mind of yours? I'm moving out, I said simply. She laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. Are you now? And where exactly will you go? How will you support yourself? You have no money, Emma. No real job prospects. No place to live. I've made arrangements. The laughter died in her throat. What arrangements? I have a place to stay. And a job. It's all taken care of. She stared at me, reassessing. For the first time since my father died, I saw a flash of genuine uncertainty in her eyes. This is absurd. You can barely take care of yourself. And what about finishing high school? Have you thought about that? I'll continue at my current school. There are provisions for students in independent living situations. Her eyes narrowed. Who's been helping you? One of your teachers? That guidance counselor? When I didn't respond, she slammed her hand on the counter. Answer me! It doesn't matter, I said, maintaining my composure despite my racing heart. What matters is that I'm leaving today. After school, no. The word was flat, final. You're not going anywhere. This little fantasy ends now. You can't stop me. I'm 18, legally an adult. Legal adult or not, you're still a high school student with no means of supporting yourself. No judge would consider you capable of independent living. That's not for you to decide anymore." Her face hardened. "Let me be very clear, Emma. If you attempt to leave this house, I will report you as unstable and potentially suicidal. I'll tell the authorities that you've been making threats, that you're a danger to yourself. I have friends in the police department who will believe me without question. How do you think your precious independence will fare then?" The threat sent a chill through me, but I had anticipated something like this. "You won't do that, won't I? Try me. If you do, I'll tell them everything. About how you've treated me since Dad died. About how you made him sign those papers while he was medicated. About the will in the attic that leaves everything to me, not you." Her face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "I found it, Diane. Dad's real will. The one that existed before you came along. The one that states clearly that I am his sole heir. I also found his letter questioning what you had made him sign. It's all documented, all safe with people you can't reach." For a moment she seemed genuinely shaken. Then her expression hardened again. "You're bluffing. There's no will. And even if there was, it doesn't matter. The current legal documents supersede any previous arrangements. Not if those documents were obtained through fraud or coercion. Not if the signatory was impaired by medication and unable to give informed consent. Dad's doctors will confirm how heavily medicated he was during those final weeks." She stared at me, calculation replacing shock. "Who else knows about this? Who have you told?" "Enough people to ensure the truth comes out, whether I'm here or not." It was a calculated risk, revealing how much I knew, but I needed to neutralize her threats. "You ungrateful little bitch," she hissed, mask falling away completely. "After everything I've done for you." "Everything you've done to me?" I corrected. "You've abused me, isolated me, stolen what should have been mine. But that ends today." She took a step toward me, and for a moment I thought she might strike me. Instead, she laughed, the sound cold and brittle. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Playing detective, gathering your little bits of evidence. But you're forgetting one crucial detail. Possession is 9/10 of the law. I control the assets now. I live in this house. I have all the documentation showing I'm the rightful owner. By the time any legal challenge works its way through the courts, years will have passed." "Maybe," I conceded. "But I'm prepared for that." Her eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm leaving today regardless. And the legal process starts today too." "What legal process?" When I didn't answer, her voice rose. "What have you done?" The doorbell rang, interrupting our confrontation. Diane froze, glancing toward the front of the house. "Are you expecting someone?" I asked, though I knew exactly who it was. Without answering, she strode to the front door and yanked it open. On the porch stood a man in a suit, holding a leather briefcase. "Diane Harrington?" he asked formally. "Yes. Who are you?" "My name is Kevin Morales. I'm a process server for the county court." He handed her a thick envelope. "You've been served with legal notice of an emergency injunction freezing all assets of the estate of James Thomas Harrington, pending investigation into allegations of fraud and coercion in the transfer of said assets. The court has scheduled a preliminary hearing for next Monday at 9 a.m. Diane stared at the envelope, then at the man, her face a mask of shock and fury. "This is ridiculous. There's been some mistake." "No mistake, ma'am. All the details are in the documents. Have a good day." He turned and walked back to his car. Diane slammed the door and whirled to face me, her eyes blazing. "You did this." "No, Diane. You did this when you decided to manipulate a dying man, when you chose to abuse his daughter, when you stole what wasn't yours to take." I picked up my school backpack. "I'll be back after school to collect my things." "Mr. Brennan advised me to tell you that removing or destroying any of my personal property would constitute additional violations of the court order." "Brennan?" Her voice was strangled. "Michael Brennan is involved in this. He was Dad's friend and executor of his real will." I moved toward the door. "I should get to school." "Don't want to be late on my birthday." She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "You're not going anywhere. We're going to sit down and discuss this like rational adults." I looked pointedly at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. "Let go of me, Diane, or I'll add assault to the list of charges." For a long moment we stood frozen in a silent battle of wills. Then, slowly, she released my arm. "This isn't over," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "You have no idea what you're doing." "Actually, I know exactly what I'm doing. For the first time since Dad died, I'm taking control of my life." I opened the front door. "I'll see you this afternoon. I suggest you use the time to consult with your attorney. You're going to need one." As I walked to the bus stop, my heart pounding but my steps steady, I felt something I hadn't experienced in almost a year. Hope. Real, substantial hope. The road ahead would be challenging. Legal battles, rebuilding my life, processing the trauma of the past year. But I had taken the first crucial step. I had broken free of Diane's control. I had set in motion the process that would, eventually, restore what she had stolen from me. I had reclaimed my agency, my future. And looking back at the house that had transformed from my childhood home into a prison, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. Diane had believed she'd broken me, that I would remain her servant forever. She had underestimated me catastrophically. Moving out was just the beginning. Having her answer for her crimes would be the true victory, a victory I now knew with absolute certainty was within my reach. The workday passed in a blur of well-wishes from teachers who knew it was my birthday and nervous anticipation of what would await me at home. I had arranged for Mrs. Collins to drive me back to the house after school, both to help transport my belongings and to serve as a witness in case Diane tried anything drastic. "Are you sure about this?" Mrs. Collins asked as we pulled up in front of the house. "You can still change your mind." "I've never been more sure of anything," I replied, "but thank you for being here." To my surprise, Diane's car wasn't in the driveway. When I unlocked the front door and entered cautiously, the house was silent. "Hello?" I called. "Diane?" No answer. I motioned for Mrs. Collins to follow me inside. She must be out. "Let's get my things quickly." We hurried upstairs to my bedroom, where I began packing the few possessions I hadn't already smuggled out. Clothes, books, the laptop Diane had confiscated months ago. As I worked, I noticed something odd about the house. An unnatural stillness, as if it had been abandoned. "I'm going to check something," I told Mrs. Collins. "Keep packing, please?" I moved from room to room, a growing sense of disbelief building inside me. Diane's bedroom closet stood open, half empty. Her jewelry box was gone from the dresser. In her home office, the desk drawers hung open, papers scattered across the floor as if someone had rifled through them in a hurry. When I reached the attic door, I found it ajar. Heart pounding, I climbed the stairs and made my way to the hidden file cabinet. It stood open, completely empty. "She's gone," I said when I returned to my bedroom, where Mrs. Collins was zipping up the last of my bags. She took her clothes, her jewelry, the documents from the attic, everything of value she could carry. Mrs. Collins frowned. "Should we call the police?" I considered the question. "Let me call Mr. Brennan first," the attorney answered on the second ring. When I explained what we had found, he sighed heavily. "This complicates things, but it's not entirely unexpected. She's panicking, which actually works in our favor legally. Fleeing after being served with a court order doesn't exactly scream innocent party." "What about the documents she took?" "Dad's will, the letter? We have your photographs, which are admissible as evidence. And the court has already issued the emergency injunction freezing the assets, which means any major financial transactions she attempts will be flagged. So what do we do now? Now you focus on getting settled in your new place. I'll contact the authorities about Diane's disappearance and apparent attempt to evade court proceedings. This is a marathon, Emma, not a sprint." After we disconnected, I stood in the middle of my childhood home, feeling strangely disconnected from it. This house held so many memories of my father, of my life before Diane, but it also contained the darkness of the past year. I wasn't sure if I wanted to reclaim it, even if the legal proceedings eventually awarded it to me. "Ready to go?" Mrs. Collins asked gently. I nodded, picking up my bags. "I'm ready." As we drove away, I didn't look back. Whatever happened with Diane, whatever the outcome of the legal battles ahead, I had achieved the most important victory already. I was free. No longer a servant, no longer a victim, but a young woman in control of her own destiny. The transitional apartment was small but clean and safe. Mrs. Collins helped me settle in, bringing groceries and making sure I had everything I needed for my first night of independence. My job at the bookstore would start the following weekend, providing enough income to cover basic expenses while the legal proceedings unfolded. That night, alone in my new space, I opened the journal Mr. Brennan had given me as a birthday gift. "To record your new beginning," the card had read. I stared at the blank page for a long moment, pen poised, then began to write. Today, I turned 18. Today, I escaped. Today, I began the process of reclaiming what was stolen from me. It won't be easy. The road ahead is uncertain. But for the first time in a year, I am breathing freely. Diane believed she had broken me, that I would remain her servant forever. She was wrong. Moving out was just the first step. Having her answer for her crimes will be the true victory, a victory I now know is within my reach. I closed the journal, a sense of quiet determination settling over me. Whatever came next, whether Diane was found quickly or managed to hide for a time, whether the legal battle was swift or protracted, I would face it with the same resilience that had gotten me through the darkest year of my life. My father had believed in me, had trusted in my strength, my determination. And though he was gone, I would honor that belief by fighting for justice, for my future, for the life he had wanted me to have. Diane had underestimated me catastrophically. That was her first mistake. It would also be her last. 3 days after my escape, the police found Diane's car abandoned at a bus station 50 miles away. The vehicle had been wiped clean of fingerprints, and the security cameras at the station had mysteriously malfunctioned during the hours she would have been there. Detective Morales, the officer assigned to my case, didn't seem surprised. People who commit financial fraud are usually pretty meticulous, he explained as we sat in the small police station conference room. And your stepmother had time to plan her exit. I twisted my hands in my lap. Do you think she's left the country? Possibly. We've flagged her passport, but if she had false identification already prepared, he shrugged, his expression apologetic. We'll keep looking, but you should prepare yourself for the possibility that this could take time. Time. Everyone kept telling me to be patient, to prepare for a lengthy process. Mr. Brennan, when discussing the legal proceedings to reclaim my inheritance, the therapist Mrs. Collins had connected me with when addressing my recovery from Diane's abuse, and now the police regarding her capture. But patience had never been my strong suit, especially not now, with freedom so new and justice seemingly just beyond my grasp. What about the financial accounts? I asked. Has she accessed them? Detective Morales consulted his notes. The freeze was implemented quickly, so the main accounts are secure. But there was a safety deposit box at First National that was emptied the morning you confronted her, before the court order was officially in the system. My stomach tightened. What was in it? We're working with the bank to determine that. They have a general inventory requirement, but my mother's jewelry. I interrupted, the realization hitting me suddenly. She must have moved it from the house to the safety deposit box at some point. The thought of Diane possessing those precious items, the diamond and sapphire necklace, my mother's wedding ring, the pearl earrings my father had given her on their 10th anniversary, made me physically ill. Those pieces weren't just valuable, they were irreplaceable connections to the mother I'd lost so young. We'll add that to the report, Detective Morales said, making a note. If she attempts to sell any distinctive pieces, it might help us track her. After the meeting, I walked slowly back to my apartment, emotions churning. The initial euphoria of escape had faded, replaced by the grinding reality of what lay ahead. Diane was gone, but her shadow still loomed over my life. The legal battles to reclaim my inheritance could take years. My financial situation was precarious at best. And while I was no longer forced to be her servant, I still carried the psychological scars of that year of captivity. My phone buzzed as I climbed the stairs to my second-floor apartment. A text from Mr. Brennan. Good news. Judge has appointed a special administrator for the estate pending resolution. House and accounts preserved. Call me. I leaned against the wall, relief washing over me. At least Diane couldn't drain the accounts from wherever she was hiding. At least the house, my childhood home, was protected for now. My apartment felt especially small that evening as I heated a cup of soup on the single-burner hot plate. The transitional housing was meant to be temporary, just until I could afford something better, or until the estate issues were resolved. A twin bed, a folding table with one chair, a dresser missing its bottom drawer, and a bathroom so tiny you could brush your teeth while showering. But it was mine. No one monitored my movements here. No one assigned me endless chores or punished me for invisible infractions. No one controlled my food intake or sleep schedule. I was free, even if that freedom came in a 200-square-foot package with questionable plumbing. As I sipped my soup, I called Mr. Brennan for details about the special administrator. The court has appointed Barbara Chen, he explained. She's fair, thorough, and has experience with contested estates. This is very good news, Emma. What does it mean practically? I asked. For the house, the accounts, everything? It means everything is preserved in its current state until the legal questions are resolved. Ms. Chen will ensure bills are paid, taxes filed, property maintained. No assets can be liquidated or moved without court approval. And if Diane is caught? When Diane is caught, he corrected gently, she'll face charges both for the financial fraud and for violating the court order. The evidence we've assembled is compelling, Emma. The court will see what she did. After we hung up, I opened my journal and recorded the day's developments. Writing had become a form of therapy for me, a way to process the swirling emotions and track the slow progress toward justice. Some days the pages filled with anger, raw, unfiltered rage at what Diane had stolen from me, not just materially but emotionally. Other days reflected my fears, that she'd never be found, that I'd never fully recover from the psychological damage she'd inflicted, that I'd somehow fail to build the life my father had wanted for me. Tonight's entry was more measured. Special administrator appointed today. The house and accounts are safe for now. Diane's car found abandoned, but she's still missing. Detective thinks she may have planned this escape route in advance. The thought of her out there somewhere, living off what she stole from Dad and me, makes my blood boil. But I'm trying to focus on what I can control. My job, my studies, my healing. Justice will come. I have to believe that. The next morning brought another development. Mrs. Collins called as I was getting ready for school. Emma, I don't want to alarm you, but someone broke into my car last night. My hand froze on my hairbrush. What? Are you okay? I'm fine, but they took my laptop and the folder of documents you gave me for safekeeping. The folder had contained copies of the evidence I'd gathered against Diane, photographs of the original will, my documentation of her abuse, the letter from my father questioning the documents he'd signed while medicated. It has to be connected to Diane, I said, my mind racing. Did you report it? Yes, the police have been here. They said car break-ins are common in my neighborhood, but given your situation, they're taking it more seriously. I'll call Detective Morales. And Mr. Brennan, we have digital backups of everything, but still. My voice trailed off as the implications sank in. If Diane was behind this, it meant she was still nearby. Or at least she had accomplices who were. I'm so sorry, Emma. I should have kept everything in the house. It's not your fault, I assured her, though my heart was pounding. We knew Diane might try something like this. That's why we made multiple copies. After hanging up, I called Detective Morales, who promised to coordinate with the officers investigating the break-in. Then I contacted Mr. Brennan, who was less concerned than I expected. The original documents are safe with me, he reminded me, and we've already filed everything with the court. Stealing copies won't change the legal situation, but it means she's still connected to what's happening here. I insisted. She might be planning something else. There was a pause before he responded. Emma, I think we should discuss additional security measures for you. If Diane is indeed in the area or has people working on her behalf, your safety could be at risk. The thought had already occurred to me, sending ice through my veins. Diane had never been physically violent beyond the occasional slap, but she had never been cornered before either. People could become unpredictable when desperate. What kind of security measures? I asked. For starters, we should install better locks on your apartment, perhaps a security camera. And you should vary your routes to school and work, be aware of your surroundings, report anything suspicious immediately. I agreed to all his suggestions, though the need for them added another layer of stress to my already complicated life. As if reclaiming my inheritance and finishing high school while working part-time wasn't challenging enough, now I had to worry about Diane potentially lurking around every corner. That afternoon, as I shelved books at my new job, I found myself scrutinizing every customer who entered the store. Was that woman in sunglasses one of Diane's friends? Did that man linger too long near the register? Was I being watched, followed, studied? You seem jumpy today? My manager, Kelly, observed as I dropped a stack of paperbacks I'd been carrying. Everything okay? I forced a smile. Just tired. Didn't sleep well. I couldn't explain the real situation, that my abusive stepmother had stolen my inheritance, forced me into servitude, then fled when confronted with legal consequences, and might now be stalking me. It sounded melodramatic even in my own head, like the plot of a bad thriller novel rather than my actual life. So I kept it simple with people who didn't know the full story. I was living independently due to family issues. I was working to support myself while finishing school. I was fine, really. Just navigating some challenges. The half-truths made interactions easier, but left me feeling isolated. Only a handful of people knew what I was really going through. Mr. Brennan, Mrs. Collins, Detective Morales, and my therapist, Dr. Winters. Everyone else got the sanitized version, the socially acceptable explanation for my unusual living situation. That evening, Mr. Brennan's associate came by to install new locks on my apartment door and a small security camera that would alert my phone if anyone approached while I was out. The precautions should have made me feel safer, but instead they underscored the reality of my situation. I was still looking over my shoulder, still affected by Diane's presence even in her absence. As April turned to May, life settled into a new routine. School from 8 to 3, work from 4 to 8, homework until midnight, then collapse into exhausted sleep only to repeat it all the next day. Weekends brought double shifts at the bookstore, laundry at the building's coin-operated machines, and grocery shopping carefully calculated to stretch my modest paycheck as far as possible. It wasn't easy, but there was dignity in the struggle, in earning my own money, making my own decisions, answering to no one but myself. And throughout it all, the legal process inched forward. The preliminary hearing confirmed the freeze on the estate assets and formally recognized the questions surrounding my father's will. Ms. Chen, the special administrator, began the meticulous process of cataloging everything Diane had controlled. The investigation into Diane's whereabouts continued, with occasional leads that inevitably fizzled out, and I healed, slowly but steadily. Dr. Winters helped me understand that what I had experienced was abuse, plain and simple. The forced labor, the isolation, the emotional manipulation, all textbook tactics of an abuser. Recognizing this didn't immediately erase the effects, but it helped me contextualize my experience and work through the lingering trauma. Recovery isn't linear, Doctor. Winters reminded me during one session when I expressed frustration with my progress. You'll have good days and bad days. The important thing is the overall trajectory. On good days, I felt almost normal, laughing with customers at the bookstore, participating in class discussions, imagining a future where Diane was just an unpleasant chapter in my life story rather than its defining feature. On bad days, the nightmares returned. Dreams where I was back in that house, scrubbing floors until my hands bled while Diane watched, smiling coldly. Or worse, dreams where my father was alive again but couldn't see or hear me, while Diane whispered poison in his ear. I would wake, gasping, sheets twisted around me, the phantom sensation of cleaning chemicals still burning my skin. But the bad days grew fewer as spring progressed. And then, almost exactly 2 months after my escape, came the breakthrough we'd been waiting for. "They found her," Detective Morales announced when I answered his call one Tuesday morning before school. Diane was apprehended in Montreal last night. The world seemed to tilt momentarily as his words registered. Canada? She went to Canada? Apparently she crossed at a smaller border checkpoint using a fake ID. She'd been living in an apartment there under the name Diana Harrison. Canadian authorities received a tip from someone who recognized her from the bulletins we'd distributed. Is she being brought back here?" I asked, barely able to form the question through the rush of emotions. "Yes, the extradition process has already begun. It helps that we have clear documentation of the fraud and the flight to avoid court proceedings. She'll likely be back in state custody within the week." I sank onto my bed, legs suddenly too weak to support me. "And then what happens?" "She'll face arraignment on multiple charges: fraud, elder abuse, contempt of court for violating the freeze order, and potentially additional charges once we complete our investigation. Mr. Brennan can fill you in on the civil side of things, but criminally speaking, she's looking at serious consequences." After hanging up, I sat motionless, trying to process the news. Diane had been found. She was being brought back to face justice. The abstract hope I'd been clinging to for months was suddenly concrete reality. I should have felt elated, triumphant. Instead, I felt strangely hollow, as if the constant focus on finding Diane had been filling a space inside me that was now empty. "That's normal, Dr. Winters assured me when I described the feeling during our emergency session that afternoon. "You've been operating in crisis mode for so long, first surviving her abuse and then pursuing justice. Now that a major goal has been achieved, there's a natural letdown. But shouldn't I be happy? This is what I wanted. And part of you is happy," she pointed out. "But another part is probably anxious about what comes next. The court appearances, possibly testifying, having to see her again. Plus, catching Diane doesn't automatically restore everything you lost or heal the trauma you experienced." She was right, of course. Finding Diane was just one step in a longer journey. There would be criminal proceedings, civil litigation over the estate, continued therapy to address the psychological scars. The road to true resolution stretched far beyond this single milestone. Still, when I met with Mr. Brennan the following day to discuss next steps, I felt more centered, more prepared for what lay ahead. "The criminal case will proceed first," he explained as we sat in his office. "Given the evidence, the prosecutor believes Diane will likely accept a plea deal rather than risk a trial." "What kind of deal?" I asked. "That depends on various factors, including what was found in her possession when she was arrested and how cooperative she's willing to be. But at minimum, she'll face felony charges for the financial fraud and elder abuse." "Will I have to testify?" He considered the question carefully. "If the case goes to trial, yes. If she accepts a plea deal, possibly not, though your victim impact statement would still be important at sentencing." The thought of facing Diane in court made my stomach clench, but I pushed through the anxiety. "And the civil case? My inheritance? That looks very promising. The special administrator has already cataloged significant discrepancies between your father's assets before his marriage to Diane and the current state of the estate. Combined with the original will you discovered and your father's letter expressing concerns about the documents he signed while medicated, we have a strong case for invalidating the transfers to Diane." "How long will it take?" "Honestly, it's hard to say. If Diane contests everything, it could be lengthy. But given the criminal charges she's facing, her attorney might advise her to cooperate on the civil side to potentially reduce her criminal sentence." He leaned forward, his expression serious but encouraging. "The important thing, Emma, is that we're moving forward. She's been caught. She'll face consequences. And we're well on our way to restoring what rightfully belongs to you." When I left his office, the May sunshine seemed brighter somehow, the world more vibrant. For the first time since my father's death, I felt real hope, not just for justice, but for a future where Diane's shadow no longer darkened every aspect of my life. That feeling lasted exactly 3 days. On Saturday morning, as I was preparing for my shift at the bookstore, there was a knock at my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw Detective Morales standing in the hallway, his expression grim. My heart sank as I opened the door. "What's happened?" "May I come in?" he asked instead of answering. I stepped back to allow him entry, dread building in my chest. "It's about Diane, isn't it? Has she escaped again?" "No, nothing like that. She's securely in custody." He cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "But there have been some complications with the evidence." "What kind of complications?" He gestured to my single chair. "Maybe you should sit down." I remained standing. "Just tell me, please." Detective Morales sighed. The search of Diane's Montreal apartment yielded some concerning items. Specifically, a laptop containing what appears to be a detailed journal where you outlined plans to falsify evidence against her in order to claim your father's estate. The words made no sense at first. "A journal? I don't understand." "The journal contains entries dating back several months, describing how you plan to create false documentation, including a fabricated will and letter from your father to make it appear that Diane had manipulated him. It also details your intention to make false claims of abuse to strengthen your case." "That's absurd!" I exclaimed. "I never wrote any such thing. Diane must have created it herself to discredit me." "That's what we assumed initially," he said carefully. "But the laptop also contained photographs of you supposedly writing in this journal, taken at various times through what appears to be a hidden camera in your bedroom at the house. And the handwriting analysis preliminarily matches samples of your handwriting from school assignments." The room seemed to spin around me. "This is insane. She's framing me." "The abuse was real. The will and letter were real. You've seen the evidence." "I know what we've seen," he said, raising his hands in a calming gesture. "And the investigation is ongoing. But I wanted to warn you that Diane's attorney is using this to mount a defense. They're claiming you orchestrated an elaborate frame-up to steal the estate from her." I sank onto the chair, legs no longer able to support me. Who would believe that? After everything she did? "The prosecutor still believes in our case," he assured me. "But this complicates things. Diane's attorney is painting her as the victim of your scheme, a grieving widow targeted by a resentful stepdaughter who couldn't accept her father's decisions." The irony was so brutal it almost made me laugh. Diane, who had abused and exploited me for nearly a year, was now claiming to be my victim. And she had apparently been methodically building this counter-narrative for months, secretly preparing for the possibility that I might someday fight back. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice hollow. "Now we investigate this new evidence thoroughly." Digital forensics will examine the laptop and photos to determine their authenticity and when they were created. We'll interview additional witnesses from the household, service providers, neighbors, anyone who might have observed the dynamics between you and Diane, and we'll continue building our case based on the evidence we know is legitimate. After he left, I sat motionless, trying to process this new development. Just when justice had seemed within reach, Diane had managed to muddy the waters, to cast doubt on my credibility and the evidence against her. It was exactly the kind of calculated manipulation that had characterized her treatment of me, a twist I should have anticipated but somehow hadn't. I called Mr. Brennan immediately, my voice shaking as I relayed what Detective Morales had told me. "I was afraid of something like this," he admitted. "Diane's too clever to not have a contingency plan. But it's all lies. I never wrote any journal plotting against her. The will and letter are real. The abuse happened exactly as I described. I believe you, Emma. And we'll fight this. But you need to prepare yourself for a more challenging battle than we initially anticipated. What can we do? First, we need to thoroughly examine this alleged journal and the photos. If Diane created them, there will be inconsistencies, digital trails we can follow. Second, we need to gather more corroborating evidence of the abuse you suffered, medical records, witness statements from anyone who might have noticed changes in you during that time, school attendance and performance records showing the decline after your father's death. And if that's not enough? I asked, voicing the fear that was forming a knot in my stomach. There was a pause before he answered. Then we adjust our strategy accordingly. But Emma, the truth is on our side. It may take longer than we hoped, but the truth has a way of emerging. The truth. Such a simple concept, yet suddenly so difficult to prove. Diane had created an alternate reality where I was the manipulator and she, the innocent victim. And now both versions, the truth and her elaborate lie, would compete for credibility in the justice system. The following weeks were a blur of meetings with investigators, forensic specialists, and legal consultants. Mr. Brennan assembled a team dedicated to disproving Diane's fabricated evidence, while the prosecutor's office conducted its own analysis of the laptop and photographs. Diane, meanwhile, had been released on bail with an ankle monitor, a development that sent me spiraling into anxiety despite assurances that she was prohibited from contacting me or coming within a mile of my apartment, school, or workplace. "She's out there," I told Dr. Winters during an emergency session. Planning her next move, building her lies, probably laughing at how easily she's manipulated the system again. "This setback doesn't mean she's won, Dr. Winters reminded me. "It means the process will be more complicated than we hoped. But remember, Emma, you've already achieved something significant. You're free from her direct control. You're living independently, supporting yourself, continuing your education. Those are victories she can't take from you." I tried to focus on those victories during the dark days that followed. Tried to remember that regardless of the legal outcome, I had escaped the daily abuse, the servitude, the psychological torture of living under Diane's thumb. But the shadow of her accusations hung over everything. At school, whispers followed me through the hallways as details of the case leaked out. Some students openly questioned my story, suggesting I was the spoiled rich girl trying to steal from my stepmother rather than the abuse survivor I knew myself to be. "People love a scandal, Mrs. Collins said when I confided my distress over the rumors. "And they especially love when the narrative flips, when the apparent victim becomes the potential villain. It satisfies some perverse human desire for complexity." "But it's not complex," I protested. "It's simple. She abused me. She stole from me. She's lying to cover it up. You and I know that, and anyone who truly knows you knows that. The rest? They don't matter, Emma. Their opinions can't change the truth." I clung to that perspective as preliminary hearings in both the criminal and civil cases moved forward. In criminal court, Diane pleaded not guilty to all charges, her attorney confidently presenting the fabricated journal as evidence that I had framed her. In civil court, her legal team filed motions to dismiss my claims against the estate, arguing that my father had been of sound mind when transferring assets to her, and that my allegations were motivated by greed and resentment. Through it all, I forced myself to appear calm and composed, dressed in conservative outfits Mrs. Collins helped me select, answering questions clearly and consistently during depositions and hearings. I was determined not to give Diane the satisfaction of seeing me break, not to provide any fuel for her narrative that I was unstable or vindictive. But privately, the stress took its toll. I lost weight I couldn't afford to lose. Sleep became elusive, even with the medication Dr. Winters prescribed. My grades, which had been improving since my escape, began to slip again as I struggled to concentrate amid the legal chaos. Then, in late June, came an unexpected breakthrough. "We found something," Mr. Brennan announced when I arrived at his office for our weekly update meeting. His expression was more animated than I'd seen it in weeks. "Something that proves Diane's evidence is fabricated." Hope fluttered in my chest. "What is it?" He gestured to his computer screen, where a series of photographs were displayed. The images Diane claimed showed me writing in the incriminating journal. "Look at the dates embedded in these image files. According to the metadata, they were taken in January and February of this year. That's when I was still living in the house," I confirmed, not understanding the significance. "Exactly. But look at this." He zoomed in on one of the images, focusing on a small section of my bedroom visible in the background. There, partially visible on my desk, was a textbook. "This is your AP Literature anthology, correct?" I peered at the image. "Yes, that's right. And this particular edition was only issued to students this spring, according to your school's curriculum director, after you had already moved out of Diane's house." The implication hit me like a physical blow. So the photos couldn't have been taken when she claims they were. Exactly. They've been manipulated, the dates changed, and possibly the images themselves digitally altered. Our forensic analyst is preparing a detailed report, but even this preliminary finding is significant. It proves Diane has been fabricating evidence. For the first time in weeks, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Will this be enough to discredit the journal too? It certainly casts serious doubt on its authenticity. If she lied about the photos, why would the journal be genuine? Plus, our handwriting expert has identified several inconsistencies between the writing in the journal and your known handwriting samples. The prosecution is already considering additional charges for obstruction of justice and falsifying evidence. The news reinvigorated my hope that justice was still possible. If Diane's elaborate frame-up was unraveling, perhaps the truth would prevail after all. But Diane, ever resourceful, had one more card to play. 2 days after Mr. Brennan's revelation about the manipulated photos, I arrived home from work to find an unfamiliar envelope that had been slid under my apartment door. Inside was a single sheet of paper containing a typed message. "Emma, I know the truth about your father's will. I helped Diane create the false documents that transferred everything to her. I have proof. The original drafts, emails discussing the plan, even recordings of conversations with your father where she manipulated him. For $50,000 cash, these materials are yours. If interested, place a classified ad in the Tribune using the code word redemption. You have 3 days to decide. No signature. No contact information beyond the cryptic instructions about the classified ad." My hands trembled as I read the note again. Could this be legitimate? Someone who had helped Diane with her scheme now turning on her? Or was it another of Diane's manipulations, a trap designed to further discredit me? I called Mr. Brennan immediately, reading him the note word for word. "This is concerning," he said after a long pause. "It could be exactly what it appears, someone with genuine evidence willing to sell it. Or it could be an elaborate setup. If you were to place the ad and attempt to pay for information, Diane's team could use that to support their narrative that you're fabricating evidence against her. So what do I do? Ignore it? No, we need to take this to the authorities. Detective Morales should be informed immediately. This could be a break in the case, or it could be witness tampering or obstruction of justice if it's coming from Diane's camp." I met Detective Morales at the police station that evening, handing over the note in an evidence bag as he had instructed. "Interesting timing," he observed after reading it. "Just as Diane's fabricated evidence is being discredited, this potential lifeline appears. You think she's behind it?" I asked. "It seems probable, but we'll investigate thoroughly. Fingerprint analysis, handwriting on the envelope if there is any, checking security cameras near your building to see who might have delivered it." He looked up from the note. "In the meantime, do not respond to this in any way. Don't place the ad. Don't attempt to contact anyone about it. If this is legitimate, we'll find out. If it's a trap, we don't want you anywhere near it." I agreed, though part of me desperately wanted to pursue any lead that might help prove Diane's guilt. The thought that evidence existed that could definitively expose her machinations was tantalizing, even if accessing it required ethically questionable methods. Over the next few days, I found myself obsessively checking my phone for updates from Detective Morales or Mr. Brennan. When none came, I threw myself into work and school, trying to distract myself from the waiting game that my life had become. Then, exactly 1 week after receiving the mysterious note, everything changed. I was in the middle of my shift at the bookstore when my phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Brennan. "Call me immediately." Major development? Heart racing, I asked Kelly for an emergency break and stepped into the storage room to make the call. Diane's attorney has reached out about a potential plea deal, Mr. Brennan announced without preamble. In the criminal case, she would plead guilty to reduced charges of financial exploitation and document fraud. In exchange, the elder abuse charges would be dropped. For the civil case, she would relinquish all claims to your father's estate and provide a full accounting of assets she's transferred or hidden. I gripped the phone tighter. Why would she agree to that now? After everything she's done to fight the charges? That's the interesting part. Apparently, a former colleague of hers from her interior design business came forward yesterday with emails and text messages documenting Diane's plan to gain control of your father's assets. This person had helped Diane prepare some of the fraudulent documents, believing at the time they were legitimate business papers. When she realized what she had been part of, she initially kept quiet out of fear, but the recent publicity around the case prompted her to come forward. "The note," I whispered. "It must have been from her. Possibly, though she claims she never contacted you directly. Either way, her evidence is damning. It includes communications where Diane explicitly discussed using your father's medication schedule to ensure he was at his most confused when signing documents." I leaned against the storage room shelves, emotions swirling. Relief, vindication, lingering anger at what Diane had put me through. So it's over? She's admitting what she did? Not publicly. The plea deal would allow her to avoid a full admission of guilt, but practically speaking, yes. She's acknowledging that fighting further would only result in more severe consequences. What happens to her? Will she go to jail? Under the proposed deal, she would serve between 18 months and 3 years, depending on various factors including behavior and prison overcrowding. She would also have a felony record and be required to pay restitution. It doesn't seem like enough, I said, the words catching in my throat. After everything she did. I understand that feeling, Mr. Brennan replied gently. But consider the alternatives. A trial would be grueling for you. Months of preparation, testimony, cross-examination. And while our case is stronger now, juries can be unpredictable. This deal guarantees that Diane faces consequences and that you regain control of your inheritance without further delays or legal fees. He was right, of course. A guaranteed resolution, even an imperfect one, was better than months or years of continued legal battles with uncertain outcomes. And perhaps more importantly, accepting the deal meant I could finally start moving forward instead of constantly looking backward at what Diane had done. "I'll think about it," I promised. "How long do I have to decide?" "The prosecutor has given us 48 hours to consider the offer. I've scheduled a meeting tomorrow afternoon to go through all the details with you." That night, I barely slept, weighing the decision from every angle. Was I betraying my father's memory by allowing Diane to receive a reduced sentence? Was I selling myself short by accepting a resolution that didn't fully acknowledge the emotional and psychological abuse I'd endured? Or was I showing wisdom and maturity by choosing the certain path to recovery over the uncertain pursuit of perfect justice? I called Dr. Winters early the next morning, desperate for perspective. "There's no right or wrong answer here, Emma," she said after I'd explained the situation. "This is about what will bring you the most peace moving forward. Some survivors find that prolonging legal proceedings keeps them trapped in the trauma. Others feel that maximum punishment for their abuser is essential to their healing. What do you think I should do?" "I think you should ask yourself what your father would want for you now. Not what he would want for Diane, what he would want for you, for your well-being and your future." The question lingered with me as I met with Mr. Brennan that afternoon to review the details of the proposed plea agreement. On paper, it was a favorable resolution. Diane would serve time, I would recover my inheritance, and the legal proceedings would conclude without the additional trauma of a trial. But something still felt unresolved, a loose end I couldn't quite identify. "Before I decide," I said as the meeting was wrapping up, "there's something I need to know. Did they recover any of my mother's jewelry? The pieces Diane took from the safety deposit box before she fled?" Mr. Brennan consulted his notes. Some items were found in her Montreal apartment and have been seized as evidence. Others she claims to have sold. The plea deal includes a provision requiring her to provide documentation of any sales and to return any remaining pieces. I want to add one more condition, I said, suddenly certain of what I needed. I want to speak with her, face to face, before she goes to prison. Not a long conversation, just 5 minutes. He frowned. That's an unusual request, Emma. May I ask why? Because I need her to see me, really see me, as I am now. Not as the frightened girl she controlled, but as the person who brought her down. I need that closure. After a moment's consideration, he nodded. I'll speak with the prosecutor and Diane's attorney. If she agrees, we can arrange a supervised meeting after the plea is formally accepted but before sentencing. 2 days later, I gave my formal approval to the plea deal. The prosecutor presented it to the judge, who accepted the terms with minor modifications. Diane officially pleaded guilty to financial exploitation and document fraud. The civil case was resolved with a consent judgment returning all assets to me, with Ms. Chen continuing as administrator until my 19th birthday. And, somewhat to my surprise, Diane agreed to meet with me. The encounter was arranged in a small conference room at the courthouse 3 days before Diane's sentencing. A bailiff would be present, and the meeting would be limited to exactly 5 minutes. I spent hours considering what to wear, what to say, how to carry myself. This would likely be the last time I ever saw Diane face to face. I wanted the image I presented to haunt her during her time in prison, not out of vanity, but because it represented my final victory over her attempts to crush my spirit. I ultimately chose a simple navy blue dress that Mrs. Collins had helped me select for court appearances. Professional, mature, the outfit of a young woman with a future, not a victim. I pulled my hair back in a sleek ponytail and applied minimal makeup. Nothing flashy or attention-seeking, just clean, composed, controlled. When I entered the conference room, Diane was already seated at the table, her attorney beside her. She looked smaller somehow, diminished in her gray pantsuit without the designer accessories and perfect makeup that had been her armor. Her hair, usually impeccably colored and styled, showed gray roots and split ends. Yet even in this reduced state, she managed to summon a smirk as our eyes met. "Emma," she said, her voice carrying that familiar note of condescension. "I was surprised you wanted to see me. Come to gloat?" I sat across from her, folding my hands calmly on the table. "No. I came to thank you." The smirk faltered. "Thank me?" "Yes. Without you, I might never have discovered my own strength. I might have gone through life believing other people's estimation of my worth, accepting limitations others placed on me." I leaned forward slightly. "You taught me that the world is full of predators like you, people who see kindness as weakness, who exploit trust and manipulate emotions. Thanks to you, I'll never be vulnerable to someone like you again." Her eyes narrowed. How dramatic. Still the same fanciful Emma, turning everything into a narrative where you're the hero. "Not the hero," I corrected, "just a survivor. Someone who saw through your lies, documented your abuse, and ultimately ensured you faced consequences for your actions. I'd call that a success story, wouldn't you?" A flash of genuine anger crossed her face. "You got lucky. If that stupid woman from my office hadn't turned on me—" "It wasn't luck," I interrupted. "It was preparation meeting opportunity. I gathered evidence methodically for months while you thought I was broken. I built relationships with people who could help me while you thought I was isolated. I planned my escape while you thought I was resigned to being your servant forever." I allowed myself a small smile. "You underestimated me catastrophically, Diane. That was your first mistake." She leaned back, attempting to reassert her air of superiority. "And yet here we are. I'll serve, a year or 2 in minimum security? And then I'll still have my life, my friends, my future. While you'll be forever defined by this, the poor abused stepdaughter, damaged goods. Is that what you tell yourself to sleep at night?" I asked, genuinely curious. Because from where I'm sitting, I see a middle-aged woman who will emerge from prison as a convicted felon with no career prospects, no assets, and a reputation in tatters. Meanwhile, I'll have my education, my inheritance, and decades to build the life my father wanted for me. I stood up, noting that my allotted 5 minutes was nearly complete. "You didn't break me, Diane. You tried, God knows you tried, but in the end you only made me stronger." As I turned to leave, she called after me, a desperate edge to her voice. "He never loved you the way you think he did, you know. Your precious father. He confided in me how disappointed he was in you. How ordinary you were compared to him. I paused at the door, then looked back at her with genuine pity. "Even now you can't stop lying." "That's sad, Diane. But it doesn't matter anymore. Your words have no power over me." And they didn't. As I walked out of that room, I felt a weight lift from me that I hadn't even realized I was still carrying, the last remnants of doubt, of vulnerability to her manipulation. In those few minutes, the dynamic between us had shifted irreversibly. I was no longer her victim. I was her reckoning. 3 days later, Diane was sentenced to 30 months in state prison. As part of the restitution agreement, she provided information about assets she had hidden, including offshore accounts and property purchased under aliases. Most of my mother's jewelry was recovered, though a few pieces had indeed been sold and were lost forever. By early July, I moved back into my childhood home, not as the prisoner I had been under Diane's rule, but as its rightful owner. The house felt different now, cleansed of her presence. I spent weeks reclaiming the space, repainting rooms, rearranging furniture, erasing every trace of the year she had controlled it. Ms. Chen continued to administer the estate, teaching me about investments, property management, and financial planning, so I would be prepared to take full control when I turned 19. The inheritance was substantial, not wealth that would allow me to never work, but enough to secure my education and provide a solid foundation for my future. As senior year approached, I made decisions about college with a freedom I had once thought lost forever. I applied to writing programs, following in my father's literary footsteps as he had always encouraged me to do. I reduced my hours at the bookstore from necessity to choice, maintaining the job because I genuinely enjoyed it rather than because I desperately needed the income. Most importantly, I continued my therapy with Dr. Winters, processing not just the trauma of Diane's abuse, but also the complex grief of losing my father, which I had never been allowed to experience properly under her control. Healing isn't just about overcoming the bad, Dr. Winters reminded me during one session. It's also about reclaiming the capacity for joy, for trust, for normal human connection. Those connections began to reform and strengthen as summer turned to fall. I rebuilt friendships that had withered during my captivity. I developed a close mentoring relationship with Mrs. Collins, who helped guide my college application process. I even began cautiously dating a kind, patient boy from my AP physics class who never pressed for more details about my complicated family situation than I was ready to share. Life wasn't perfect. The nightmares still came occasionally. Certain triggers, the smell of specific cleaning products, the sound of heels clicking on hardwood floors, could still send me spiraling into anxiety. And there were moments when the magnitude of all I had lost and suffered threatened to overwhelm me. But those moments grew fewer and less intense with time, and alongside them grew something I had almost forgotten how to feel: hope. Not just for justice or escape, but for happiness, for fulfillment, for a future limited only by my own choices rather than someone else's cruelty. On the anniversary of my father's death, I visited his grave alone for the first time since his funeral. I brought fresh flowers and sat beside the headstone, telling him about my college applications, my plans for the future, the small triumphs and challenges of my daily life. "I'm okay, Dad," I said as the autumn breeze rustled through nearby trees. "Not perfect, not completely healed, but okay. And getting better every day." I placed my hand on the cool marble, imagining for a moment that I could feel his presence, proud, loving, at peace. "She thought she'd broken me," I continued softly. "Thought I'd be her servant forever. But she was wrong. And now she's paying for what she did, and I'm free. Really free." As I drove home from the cemetery, a notification appeared on my phone, an email from my first-choice university offering early admission with a merit scholarship. I pulled over, hands shaking slightly as I read the message confirming that my essay about overcoming adversity had particularly impressed the admissions committee. The essay had been challenging to write, requiring me to distill the horror and triumph of the past year into a few thousand words that revealed my resilience without defining me solely by my trauma. But in the end, I had found the right balance, had told my truth in a way that demonstrated not just what I had survived, but who I had become because of it. That evening, as I sat in my father's study, now my study, surrounded by his books and the gentle, familiar creaking of the old house, I opened my journal and wrote, "1 year ago today, I lost Dad." It was the beginning of the darkest period of my life, a time when I was isolated, abused, and robbed of everything that mattered to me. Diane believed she had won, believed she had broken my spirit so completely that I would accept a life of servitude without question. She was wrong. Moving out was just the first step. Having her arrested, watching her face the consequences of her actions, reclaiming what she had stolen, each victory was another step toward healing, toward wholeness. The journey isn't over, may never be completely over. But today I received news that I've been accepted to my first choice college. Today I visited Dad's grave as the daughter he would be proud of, strong, resilient, looking toward the future. Diane thought she'd broken me. That was her first mistake. It would also be her last. Because here I am, still standing, still fighting, still moving forward. And she's just a chapter in my story now, not the whole book, not even the most important part. Just a chapter I've survived, learned from, and finally, mercifully, turned the page on. I closed the journal, set down my pen, and smiled. Outside my window, leaves drifted from trees in the gentle dance of autumn. Inside, in this house that was mine again, in this life that was mine again, I was at peace. Not perfect, not unmarked by what had happened, but free. And that was enough.